Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to review Frostburn, the last in the true environmental books written for the 3.5 D&D setting. There are two other books which kind of are environmental books, Cityscape and Dungeonscape. I'll be reviewing those later at some point. But again, I'll be looking at the table of contents here as my quick reference of notes here. First chapter is, of course, all about the physical environment of being in a place that is frozen, both realistically and in a fantasy world, like dungeon structures that are made out of, ice and things like that, which are kind of cool because you're liable to bump into these kind of things in a fantasy world, just like frostbite, what happens when you're in a whiteout, things like that. Also, we have things that are really supernatural, like dire weather and freaky diseases and magical terrains and things like that, which I thought were kind of interesting. Next we have is some wilderness terrain for what is known as the Frostfell, and that's pretty much what they're using to refer to as the really horribly cold supernatural aspects of the world. And some of these were kind of interesting, like skybergs and snowfield terrains and taiga forest terrain, which is taigas are actually real life things. They're forests and frozen tundras. Next we have the races of the Frostfell, which they give a bunch of versions of conventional races and slightly modified for a frosty environment, dwarves that have a slightly different, that don't have stone cutting. They're really good at building with ice because they don't have any stone. They build with ice. And then they have two races specific to this book. One are the Uldras, which are a small Fey cold-based race, which are kind of interesting. I like to see Fey. I think they're kind of interesting. But then we have the Neanderthals. Now, of all three of the environment books, Stormwrath may be my favorite book overall, but this is my favorite race out of these three books. Neanderthals are just uber cool. These aren't real-world Neanderthals. These aren't our cousins that we had here in reality. These are more along the lines of what the 18th or 19th century thought of Neanderthals, as a transitional stage between apes and humans. And in that regard, they are very primitive, but also in tune with nature to a greater degree than humans are. They're very tough, they have high strength, high con, low dex, and low intelligence. Not gracile, not bright, but they're very resilient. I would love to play a Neanderthal druid. I think it would be so much fun to play one. And then we have a whole chapter on feats, which is pretty standard. Everybody's got those. Some are based purely on the environment, like mountaineering or resistance to cold. Some are like a primeval wild shape, which allows you to take on shapes from the Ice Age era animals. This book has a lot of Ice Age animal references in it. And of course you have some religious ones that deal with deities that are appropriate to a frozen setting. Then we have some prestige classes. The Cloud Anchorite, they're all about mountain climbing. The Cryokineticist, which is cool, which is about using your magic in a very cold theme and all about freezing things solid, which I kind of like. I played a sorcerer once who every single energy spell he cast was cold-based because he had energy substitution, even though the original spells themselves weren't cold-based. They gave me a lot of variety, and I'd like that. Disciple of Therm, which is... or rather Thrym, I should say, which is more religion-based. A Frost Rager, which is kind of cool, which is a barbarian PRC, which allows you to adopt defenses and attacks based on ice, which is kind of interesting. Frost Mage, Knight of the Iron Glacier, more martial kind of a class. The Primeval, which is really interesting, but I think somewhat limited. You become more primitive as you advance in this class. You lose intelligence, you lose your ability to think, but you get stronger and you get tougher and you get wiser, interestingly enough. I think it would be interesting, but at the end of this, you're basically a bright animal who's really dangerous. You pretty much become like you're just one step above an NPC at that point. Um, yeah, Stormsinger and the Winter Hunt of the Iburagu, which is a more Stormsinger is bard based, and the Winter Hunt is religious based. And they didn't really thrill me. I've never liked PRCs for bards. Bards never really excite me. Then we have a bunch of new spells, some new psionics, and of course magic items. Then we have some monsters, and again, lots of stuff in here from a Ice Age era. So you have lots of mega-sized mammals, which are very cool, which I like. The Glyptodon is in here. The Glyptodon is so cool. Imagine an ankylosaur, but it's a mammal. Then you have like the Entombed, which is what happens when someone freezes to death, but they don't die. They're out for revenge, and they want to take you with them. The White Pudding, perfect place to put the White Pudding. The Erskine, which is a humanoid bear race, very powerful. I'd like to have translate that into a player character race, but it's going to have a horrible level adjustment, man. The Yeti, the abominable Yeti, no less. And there's some animals, useful animals like caribou, Arctic fox, sea otter, penguin, seals, and a walrus, all of which are both useful as things to hunt, and possibly as if you're going to summon them in that particular environment. And the last chapter is all about adventuring sites in the setting. And like I said, I'd say Frostburn and Sandstorm are equal to me. I still like Stormwrack better, but I love the Neanderthals. I think they're so cool. So if you want some environmental stuff and you want to do it in the cold, this is your book.